You have fallen asleep thousands of times, and you have never once seen it happen. Not a single time. You can remember the pillow, the dark, a thought trailing off, and then nothing, and then morning. Try to catch the exact instant tonight, and you will fail, the way you have failed every night of your life. Here's the strange part. That failure isn't yours. Your brain is built to erase that moment while it's happening, and the thing it does has a name. We tend to imagine sleep as a switch. Awake, and then click, asleep. One clean line, crossed in an instant, like a light going out. But that's not how it works, and the fact that you can never find the line is your first clue. There is no line. Falling asleep is not a switch being thrown. It's a staggered shutdown, a building at closing time, where the lights go off floor by floor, department by department, and never all at once. Some of the systems in your brain clock out early, others keep working long after, and the last thing you'd expect is which one leaves first, and how much of your own experience walks out the door with it. Meet the part of your brain that turns things that happen into things you keep. It's called the hippocampus, a pair of curved ridges, one on each side, buried deep beneath your temples, each about the size and shape of a seahorse. That's actually what the name means, in Greek. Seahorse. Here is what it does, in one sentence. The hippocampus is what makes a moment into a memory. Not the having of an experience, the saving of it. Those are two different things, and you almost never notice the difference, because in waking life they happen together. You see a face, and a second later you can recall it. You hear a sentence, and you can repeat it back. Experiencing and recording run side by side, so seamlessly that they feel like a single act. But they are not a single act. Living a moment and filing it away for later are done by different machinery, and that machinery can come apart. When it does, something eerie happens. You can be fully awake, fully conscious, thinking and feeling and reacting, and saving none of it. This is exactly what happens as you fall asleep, and it's the reason for everything you have never been able to remember. As you sink towards sleep, your brain doesn't dim all at once. The hippocampus, the recorder, is one of the first systems to go quiet. Minutes before you actually lose consciousness, it begins to disengage. It stops writing new memories down. But awareness is still on. The rest of your brain is still running, still generating thoughts, still registering the room, still, in a real sense, you. For a stretch of time that can last several minutes, you are awake enough to experience, but no longer able to keep any of it. That is the gap. A window of your own life during which you are present, conscious, and completely unrecorded. You live it. You just never get to remember living it. Scientists call the effect sleep-onset amnesia, and once you know it's there, the whole mystery of falling asleep changes shape. The question stops being when does it happen and becomes something stranger. Why can't I keep the part I'm awake for? Picture what's shutting down around that silent recorder. As you drift, a hub deep in the center of your brain called the thalamus begins to close. The thalamus is the switchboard for your senses. Nearly everything you see, hear, and feel is routed through it on its way to the thinking parts of the brain. As it dims, it stops passing the signals through. That's the feeling of the room going far away, of a voice turning underwater, of the book growing heavy in your hands. The world isn't leaving. The gate to it is quietly swinging shut. And here is the ordering that makes the whole thing so uncanny. These systems do not power down in any sequence you would have designed. You'd assume awareness would be the first thing to go, that you would lose the thread of consciousness, and then, safely unconscious, stop recording. It is the opposite. The recorder goes dark, while the lights are still on. So how does anyone know this, if by definition nobody remembers it? This is where the science gets clever, and also where I have to be honest about what it does and doesn't prove. Take the classic experiment. Bring someone into a sleep lab, wire up their scalp, and let them drift off. Their brainwaves reveal the exact moment they slip into the first, light stage of sleep, a transition a researcher can read on the machine, even when the sleeper cannot feel it at all. Wake them just seconds later, and ask, "What were you thinking about?" Over and over, they come up blank. Not, "I was asleep" blank. They'll often insist they were still awake. Just nothing there to report. The minute before the buzzer has been quietly deleted. Wake someone earlier, before that transition, and the memory is intact. Cross that threshold, and the recent past is simply gone. That's the phenomenon. Now the honest caveat. An experiment like this shows that the memory wasn't saved, but it can't perfectly separate two possibilities. Maybe the memory was never written in the first place, or maybe it was written faintly and then failed to stick. The best current evidence points to the first. Encoding itself winds down at the door of sleep. But you should know that the recorder clocks out is the cleanest version of a story that at its edges, scientists are still working out. There's a quieter piece of evidence you may have produced yourself. Have you ever been certain you lay awake for an hour, only to be told you'd been softly snoring most of it? People pulled out of early sleep routinely swear they never went under. From the inside, unrecorded time doesn't feel like sleep. It feels like a gap you fell through, because the record simply skips, and a skip is invisible from within. And then there is the strangest evidence of all, which comes from people who couldn't form new memories at all. In a study run at Harvard, researchers had people play the video game Tetris, the falling, rotating blocks, over a few days, and watched what happened as those people fell asleep. Again and again, right at the edge of sleep, the players reported seeing it. Blocks, drifting and turning behind their closed eyes. The game had leaked into the doorway of sleep. Here is the part that matters. Among the players were patients with amnesia, people whose hippocampus was damaged, who could not form new day-to-day memories. They had no memory of ever having played the game. They would deny they had. And yet, falling asleep, they saw the falling blocks too. The experience was still getting in. The recorder simply wasn't there to write down where it came from. That is the whole phenomenon of sleep onset in miniature. Experience with no scribe on duty. So what are you actually doing in that unrecorded window? What is going on in the minutes your brain refuses to save? It has a name too, hypnagogia, the borderland between waking and sleep. And it is one of the strangest mental states a healthy human routinely enters, night after night, and almost never brings back. In hypnagogia, thinking comes loose from its moorings. Your thoughts stop marching in logical order and start drifting sideways. A word summons an image that summons a scene with no connection to where you began. You might hear your own name spoken clearly in an empty room. You might see faces, patterns, staircases, whole landscapes bloom behind your eyelids. Hypnagogic imagery, often vivid, sometimes beautiful, and gone without a trace by morning. You have felt one piece of it, even if you've forgotten the rest. That jolt, the sudden sensation of falling, or of missing a step on a staircase, that snaps you violently awake just as you're dropping off. It has a name, a hypnic jerk. It's your body giving one last involuntary twitch as the motor systems power down, sometimes read by a half-asleep brain as a fall, and answered with a reflex to catch yourself. It is one of the only souvenirs you ever carry back from the edge of sleep, and even then, only because it wakes you enough to switch the recorder back on. This borderland is so peculiar and so full of loose sideways thinking that some very inventive people learned to fish in it on purpose. Thomas Edison, the story goes, would nap in a chair holding steel balls in each hand, over metal plates on the floor. As he drifted off and his muscles went slack, the balls would slip, clang against the plates, and jolt him awake, so he could grab whatever strange half-formed idea had just floated up out of the dark. The painter Salvador Dali did the same trick with a key and an upturned plate and called it Slumber with a Key. And here's the modern twist. This isn't only a charming legend. Recent research has actually tested it, catching people right at that first threshold, waking them and checking what it did to their minds. A brief dip into this exact state, it turns out, really does leave people better at cracking certain problems afterward. There seems to be something genuinely fertile in the unguarded, loosely wired thinking of the doorway, a creative sweet spot. The quiet tragedy is that the recorder is off the whole time, so most of what surfaces there, you never get to read. Which brings us back to the question you started with, the one you've been trying to answer on the ceiling every night of your life. When exactly do you fall asleep? What is the precise instant? And the honest answer from neuroscience is, there isn't one. Not because we haven't found it yet, because it doesn't exist. Remember the building at closing time. Researchers can now watch in fine detail as sleep rolls across the brain, and what they see is not a line being crossed, but a tide coming in. Different regions go under at different moments. In fact, we now know that individual patches of the brain can fall asleep on their own, small clusters of neurons dropping offline, while a few millimeters away, their neighbors are still wide awake. It's called local sleep. It may be why, when you're exhausted, you can stare at the same sentence and take in nothing, or set your keys down and instantly have no idea where. Small regions nodding off mid-task, dark for a second while the rest of you carries on, none the wiser. And it means that, at the crucial moment, there is no single you who is either awake or asleep. Part of you has already gone under, while part of you is still here. There is no one to ask, because there is no one place where it happens. So when you go hunting for the exact instant you fell asleep, you are searching for something your brain simply does not contain. No switch, no line, just a slow handoff between systems that each quit at their own pace, and the recorder happens to be among the first out the door. That is why the moment is unrememberable. Not because it's too fast to catch, because by the time the last of you finally goes under, the part of you that could have saved the memory has already been offline for minutes. You are trying to remember a moment that was, by design, never written down. So here is what will happen tonight, exactly as it has happened every night you have ever lived. You will lie down. Your thoughts will begin to loosen and drift and turn sideways. Somewhere in there, without any signal you can feel, your hippocampus will set down its pen, and for the next few minutes you will go on living, thinking strange, unmoored thoughts, seeing faint images bloom and fade, maybe twitching once at a fall that isn't real, fully present for a stretch of your own existence that no part of you will ever keep. You will be there, you just won't be recording. Every night, you walk through a small, unlit room in the middle of your own mind, and every morning, you wake on the far side of it with no memory of the crossing. It was never yours to remember, but now at least you know the room is there, and you know its name.